Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you, many kings and prophets have desired to see what you see, and have not seen it. To hear what you hear, and have not heard it. I thank you, Father, for hiding these things from the learned and the wise, and revealing them to the innocent and the simple.
Every day, dozens of men, women, and children stream through the streets of McAllen, Texas, to this migrant center at Sacred Heart Catholic Church. They've just illegally crossed into the U.S. and have been released by Border Patrol with ankle monitors
Echeverría González. ¿Cuántos años, mamita?
while they file for asylum.
We're getting mass spikes of people crossing and turning themselves in.
Agent Chris Cabrera is with the local Border Patrol union. He says on some days they've encountered up to 1,000 immigrants along this stretch of the border.
What's driving them?
The smugglers are telling them if Hillary gets elected, that there'll be some type of amnesty, so they need to get here by a certain date. The smugglers are telling them if Hillary gets elected, that
there'll be some type of amnesty, so they need to get here by a certain date.
they're also being told that if Trump gets elected, there's going to be some magical wall that pops up overnight, and once that wall gets up, nobody will ever get in again.
At the church, it's time for this group to head to the bus depot. The routes scribbled on envelopes show they're continuing the journey north.
Churches crumbled in central Italy, and terrified residents ran into the streets as multiple earthquakes struck just after nightfall. The first quake, 5.5 magnitude, then just 2 hours later, a more powerful 6.1 magnitude aftershock. Centuries-old buildings with holes punched straight through. Huge boulders blocked roads, slowing search and rescue teams who evacuated elderly residents, going street by street. So far, at least 2 people injured. The mayor of a nearby town calling the situation apocalyptic. The tremors striking the country just 2 months after a powerful 6.2 earthquake in the same region killed nearly 300 people.
ISIL militants in Afghanistan have shot and killed at least 30 civilians in the central province of Ghor. Well, government authorities say the shootings were an act of revenge after a local ISIL commander was killed earlier this week. According to the United Nations, around 2,500 civilians have been killed in Afghanistan this year alone. Well, the central government has made little headway securing the country against terrorist threat.
ISIS is going door to door in towns and villages south of Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, demanding that civilians move north, marching them north into Mosul proper, where they'll join some 1.2 million other civilians who will no doubt be used as human shields. This is what the Associated Press and Reuters are both reporting this morning. It's a troubling new development, and what this indicates, if anything, is that ISIS is planning on making a last stand in Mosul. There had been some talk before that maybe ISIS would forfeit the city and move west into Syria and take up positions in Raqqa with civilians and with their families, with the fighters from foreign areas who would come to this area in order to defend the so-called caliphate that they declared 2 years ago.
Today, riot police in North Dakota arrested protesters who've been blocking construction of an oil pipeline.
The whole world's watching you, Nazi.
It was tough and it was tense as police moved forward to take over makeshift camps and protesters were detained. It was an unequal fight. Police had billy clubs, mace, and weapons. This is the way it's been going. The police have just arrested one of the protesters. Over here, the protesters continue to taunt them. And every time the protesters make a move, the police move right along with them.
They're telling you to beat your own.
In the middle of it all, activist Wiaka Eagleman struggled to keep the peace. And you can win against all of this.
No, I'm not saying we're going to win, but it's going to be a tough battle spiritually.
Cass County Sheriff Paul Laney ran the law enforcement operation.
Our emphasis here is we don't want a confrontation. The last thing North Dakota law enforcement wants is a confrontation. The last thing the state of North Dakota wants is a confrontation.
The camps blocked construction of a nearly 1,200-mile pipeline that would carry crude oil from the Bakken oil fields to Illinois. Builders want to tunnel under the Missouri River. The Native Americans say if there was ever a leak, it would pollute a tribal lifeline that also provides drinking water to millions of Americans downstream. The protesters have come here from reservations across the U.S. And neither side shows any sign of giving in.
It's an attack that has horrified people around the world. A bomb dropped on a school in Idlib, killing at least 20 children and injuring many others. The UN's children's agency, UNICEF, says the attack was inhuman, and the UN's global education envoy, the former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown, has called for the Security Council to take action.
Thousands of civilians are escaping from ISIS as the extremists retreat from their villages. This offensive has killed hundreds of ISIS fighters, according to the US coalition, with over 300 square miles clawed back by Iraqi and Kurdish forces to the east and south. But they still haven't entered Mosul itself. There are 50,000 Iraqi ground forces, compared to the 5,000 ISIS fighters thought to be in Mosul. But the extremists have one terrifying weapon: the suicide car bomb, a vehicle laden with explosives. ISIS has used dozens of them in this battle,
The car bomb.
and we've witnessed the panic they cause on the front line.
They want to die. I guess the only, real comparison is kamikaze pilots in the Second World War.
When you're dealing with that mentality, it's a very dangerous enemy. There's no doubt about that.
Russia is sending more warships to Syria for operations against extremist groups. The naval destroyer Smyslov has departed from the Crimean port of Sevastopol. The heavily armed ship is heading for the Greek port of Piraeus before it joins its battle group in Syria. The vessel took part in previous operations in Syria back in 2013 and 15. Meanwhile, a Russian naval fleet is also on its way to the Mediterranean Sea. The fleet includes the country's only aircraft carrier, Kuznetsov, a cruiser and several destroyers.
Another powerful earthquake rattled central Italy Sunday. The preliminary magnitude was 6.6, the strongest earthquake to hit Italy in more than 35 years. It comes after a series of aftershocks last week from an earthquake in August that killed nearly 300 people.
Centuries-old buildings that withstood this series of quakes that have rocked this region finally collapsed in today's earthquake. Nuns fled for safer ground in Norcia, where the historic basilica was damaged and rubble filled streets. The earthquakes here never stop, Lifetime resident Giulio Perla told us. Among those displaced was this 88-year-old we met with her caretaker. It's difficult when you feel the shaking, Olena Olinik told us. The lady loses her bearings and doesn't know what to do. The twin quakes on Wednesday and the one in August were centered not far from here.
Very, very, very strong. The most strong.
So strong that today's quake cracked Stefano Boldrini's home and blew out windows.
So this is home now?
After the August quake, the family moved into a camper in their front yard.
Very little space.
For a vacation, this van is good, Boldrini told us, but we've never been on vacation in it.
Meantime, Syrian government forces have been locked in fierce clashes with jihadist fighters on the western edges of Aleppo. Insurgents' rocket fire is reported to have killed 38 civilians, including 14 children. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says 250 civilians have been wounded in the heavy bombardment by anti-government factions since Friday morning. Meantime, the European Union's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, held talks with Iran's President Hassan Rouhani in Iran on Saturday. Now, they agreed that the Syrian crisis must be resolved through diplomatic means.